to get more into the football talk. He spoke with Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts a little bit earlier in this week. You can check out the full interview over on Yahoo Sports. It is Eric Edholm joins us right now on the phone line here on 97.3 ESPN. Eric, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. What's going on? Thank you for promoting the video. Appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? I don't want to give away too much of what he specifically said, but I want to ask you a little bit of a bigger picture, because it seems like when Jalen Hurts speaks, whether it's in a conversation one-on-one with you or in the general media, like at a press conference, when it comes to football topics, he is dead serious. Like, he is somebody who he's not there to play around. Like, no offense to Gardner Minshew, but it's hard to take a guy like him too seriously. Whereas Jalen Hurts, he's the complete opposite when it comes to his personality with football.
Yeah, it's a good point about Minshew, too. I hadn't even considered them both being in the same room now. But, yeah, I mean, I kind of noticed that when he was coming out for the draft, 2019 college season, 2020 draft, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Talking to people around the program, they said the same types of things that, when it comes to ball, I mean, he's all business. There's a charm in him. He's got a personality. It's all there. But I think when it's business time, you kind of see what they see at the facility, whether it was Oklahoma, Alabama before that, or now the Philadelphia Eagles. So I think that's a great thing. And he was very, sort of focused and on point with us. And it was tough for him too, because we had some technical issues and he had to sit around and wait. So I appreciate his patience and his willingness to give a good interview after, some delays and some technical problems. So that was, he's a really mature kid.
I want to hit on the last point we just said. Mature, how mature he is. Yeah. He mentioned to you as well about the fact that he's now had to have 6 people who are calling plays for him. I mean, that in and of itself is absolutely wild. That you have a guy who is playing in the NFL, and he's had to go through multiple people at Alabama, then to Oklahoma, and now his second guy with the Eagles. I mean, for some people, that would just drive them nuts.
Yeah, and, you could argue that the Alabama system, quote unquote, was, a lot of overlap one year to the next, and he was only the starting quarterback for 2 of those 3 seasons. So, that said, moving on to Oklahoma, a vastly different offense, and then obviously 2 different systems that they've used the last 2 years with the Eagles, this year and last. It's really tough. A word that might mean one thing in what you're used to could mean a totally different thing, or the length of the play calls, or the route depths could be different. Everything. So it's not just an adjustment to different types of routes and things like that. There are so many different levels of responsibility. It's like going from Portuguese to Japanese in some cases too, when it comes to the verbiage. So I'm always impressed when guys are forced into situations like that and it doesn't appear to affect their play. I mean, we can't really make a judgment on Jalen Hurts on last year because it was essentially an audition. It was was he thrust into a playoff race? Yes. Was he, did some good things come out? Yes. I don't think anyone can definitively say what he did last year is going to be indicative of what his career is going to be. But, he's handled himself with aplomb pretty much everywhere he's been, and he's made tangible strides along the way. So doing so under those conditions, even with all the talent that he had at Alabama and all the talent he had at Oklahoma, I still say that's pretty darn impressive.
Eric Edholm from Yahoo Sports joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at Eric_Edholm. Check out his full interview with Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts. Eric, looking at the Eagles' big picture, I want to know from you, a lot of people this week have been coming on our station talking about the Eagles' offensive line, and that's really the reason why they believe in the team. But if you ask the people who don't think the Eagles will be good this year, they always point to Sirianni and Hurts. Where do you fall in this? Because, we got one group of people who are like, they'll win 4 games like last year. Another group of people who are like, oh, they'll win 9, 10 games. And I feel like those are both two extremes.
Yeah, I mean, I get the questioning of the head coach and the quarterback, right? Because of the fact that Nick Sirianni was a little bit of a surprise choice. I don't know that everybody was convinced he was the right choice. I think, some people are very much open-minded about it and wanting to see maybe a different type of energy in the building. He certainly is, seems to be bringing that. I understand that people look at Jalen Hurts and maybe don't see a traditional quarterback, whatever that means, because in this era, I don't know that there is a traditional quarterback. If anything, the dual threat quarterback has become more the accepted norm than, the Tom Brady's of the world, the pocket passers, the guys who lack mobility but can do special things with their arms. Now you have players who are more in the mold of Hurts, but I still get why there's some suspicion until we see otherwise. Do I think, those two guys are going to be the reason that the Eagles are going to be held back this year? Not necessarily. I mean, it could end up coming down to other factors, how the defense, develops and, who kind of steps up as the lead pass catchers and the go-to guys on offense, right? The ones who are kind of the volume targets, if you will, the ones you can, kind of lean on and rely on outside of the quarterback position. So it's really hard and in a lot of cases unfair to judge a first-year head coach. And going much beyond what we've known about them from college to talk about a quarterback with, 4 NFL starts. I get why there's hesitation, but I also say, let's see what they can do. Let's see if they're a good match. I mean, if the Eagles are hesitant, it's fair to criticize. If there's a real opportunity for him to spread his wings and go, let's see what he's capable of.
Also, we should note that all 3 of the head coaches who led the Eagles to a Super Bowl appearance, Dick Vermeil, Andy Reid, and Doug Peterson, they all had losing records their first years. So people act like, if you're not good the first year, oh my goodness. Well, who was good their first year? Chip Kelly and Ray Rose. Look what happened to them. Yeah.
I'm here in Chicago. Matt Nagy was 12-4, had a home playoff game against who, the Philadelphia Eagles. He was coach of the year over, some pretty good candidates, I would argue. So, right. We tend to overreact to what we see initially. And I think Doug started out 3-0 and then things kind of fell apart, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that. But, yeah, so, obviously you want to even boil it down even farther than that. Our impressions of weeks 1 through 3 are going to be different from weeks 4 through 6. So, yeah, I think there are some concerning things. But I'll use Sean McDermott up in Buffalo, and obviously I know some Eagles fans will remember him from the coaching staff in Philly. But
sure.
He was a guy who I was watching early in his career as a head coach, his first 5 or 6 games. And it felt like, boy, this guy doesn't have a feel for clock management and, how to manage a game. I think he's always sort of been this defensive guy. Maybe he's got too narrow a view. But by year 2, you saw him kind of correcting some of the clock and timeout mistakes that he'd made early in his career. Then in year 3, you started seeing him really become this kind of force and this respected coach. And all of a sudden, now they're on the verge of a Super Bowl. So, sometimes the progression happens the way it did with McDermott, where you're not sure at first, you have some questions, they start getting answered one by one, and eventually they kind of figure it out. Other guys never do. So, yeah, I mean, whether it's one game, half a season, even a full year, I don't know that's why firing a coach after 1 year, there better be some real cause there. There better be some stuff behind the scenes that you're aware of that is, very concerning to the point where you have to admit your mistake and move on. And luckily those are exceptions to the rule, but we've still seen a few instances of the 1-year coach in the NFL. And, I would hope that teams would have their homework on a lot of other things before they had to worry about such things. But reacting to what happens on the field based on media and fan expectations, that doesn't seem like a smart model for an NFL team to follow.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I'm reacting to. I mentioned it before you came on, Eric. I'm watching that game last night, and between that and Hard Knocks, I'm certainly convinced that Mike McCarthy might be the most overrated coach in the NFL because I just don't understand. First of all, the guy is the most uninspiring person who drops F-bombs I've ever heard in my life. Like, the dude kept cursing in Hard Knocks like he thought cursing would make him, more interesting, but it didn't. And then last night, Ezekiel Elliott had, 14 touches in the entire game? I don't understand how you're supposed to be an offensive coach. You go into a game versus the Bucs. You're supposed to play keep away against Brady. That's like the old formula. You play keep away. And what do?
Yeah.
They ask Dak to chuck the ball. Listen, Dak looked great, but it was not because of McCarthy. It was in spite of McCarthy to me.
Yeah, I'll give you – I think there are people who definitely agree with, whether it's, former players, current players, agents, people who were in Green Bay with him, who know Mike's background, who have said, look, he can be a stubborn guy. He hasn't always learned from his mistakes. Is he a very talented quarterback coach and offensive designer, big picture? Absolutely. I think so. And he gets the big picture, I think. He's always been criticized as somebody who, at times would throw the ball too much. But last night, and for a guy who made 0 tackles in the game, it's crazy to say it, but Vita Vea might have been the most dominant player on the field last night at times, right? Non-quarterback anyway. So watching him continually abuse Tyler Biadasz at center, or Williams or whoever else he was going up against. They even put him in a wide 9 technique at one point. So I don't know how much success Dallas would have had running up the gut every single time. Do I think there maybe should have been a little bit better balance? Yes, but at the same time, I think after a certain point in that game, they saw what Dak was capable of. They saw that the offensive line wasn't getting manhandled in pass protection as badly as maybe some had, predicted pregame. And so I think, I don't know. I really believe that was more of a game flow thing than anything else. But yeah, when they did run the ball, they had moderate success, a lot of, medium gains and things like that. But to try to do it consistently down against the Bucs front, I don't know. I might disagree with you a little bit on that one. I get the big picture of what you're saying, though.
Eric Edholm from Yahoo Sports joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at Eric_Edholm. He also covers college football with the NFL Draft. Eric, I got a couple college football questions for you. After last week, and I know it's only 1 week, but I got some serious concerns about Spencer Rattler as a prospect because this is now 2 straight years where he has thrown some very strange interceptions against underwhelming competition. And I was told all offseason, the Spencer Rattler you saw at the end of the year is the real Spencer Rattler. And then last week's game, he throws those interceptions. I had to hit the rewind button on my Comcast. I'm like, did I watch that correctly? And I got to tell you something. If I'm going off of only week 1, I don't know if Spencer Rattler should be a top, 5 prospect in the NFL draft after watching that game.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have, similar concerns because for as good as he can look on, let's say, 7 out of 10 throws or passing plays, there are 2 that aren't great, and then there's 1 that really frightens you. There were, a couple other plays last year that I noted that weren't interceptions or weren't turnovers, but certainly could have been. And that was one of my notes that I made this summer was that he plays fast and loose, right? I mean, he kind of he puts the ball in harm's way at times, and he trusts his own arm talent, his own ability a little bit too much. So on the one hand, you say to yourself, okay, it's great to have a riverboat gambler who's got some guts and, believes in his own ability. On the other, you have to know your limitations and also play within the scheme, too, because they've got a good one down there, right? I mean, not just Jalen Hurts, obviously, Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield and whatnot. I mean, they've cranked out some pretty good talent there, and it's not just the system doing it. So, yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I think there's always going to be some hesitation because of that element of his game where he plays a little too risky and, doesn't give what the defense or doesn't take what the defense gives him. I think it's going to be interesting to see where he is at the end of the season. He'll have about as many starts, not quite, a couple fewer, but about as many starts as Patrick Mahomes did, who started for about 2.5 years at Texas Tech. And I mean, there were people who put 2nd and 3rd round grades on Mahomes coming out because of the wild attempts, the Brett Favre type plays that he made in college. And sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. They backfired horribly. I don't know if that's, I mean, look, Oklahoma's supposed to have a better defense this year. I know that last week didn't really show it. Mahomes felt like he had to play that way at times. I don't know that Rattler should feel that way this year, even though we watched Tulane just drop 35 on him. So we'll see. I mean, if he can curb that just a little bit, there's a lot of special talent in there that can be cultivated.
In your article over at Yahoo.com, you talk about NFL draft prospects to watch this weekend. And one of them you mentioned that is very interesting to me is Kenny Pickett. And the reason why I bring that up is because I think that this Tennessee-Pitt game is probably going to be the most unknown game of the weekend. I mean, it's in Tennessee. Pitt's favored on the money, on the spreads. And I'm just like, this is an interesting game because this could either make or break, a lot of people's perception of both of these teams. And let's be realistic. Pickett at times has looked really good, and at times he's looked really bad. So to me, that Pitt versus Tennessee game is going to answer a lot of questions tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I obviously, new blood at Tennessee and kind of an interesting situation there. I don't know how quick the turnaround will be. They lost some players in the offseason, obviously, but yeah, I mean, I think the secondary is decent. The pass rush is good. So there's at least some defensive talent, even with, the linebacker they lost to Alabama, et cetera. But Pickett, as you mentioned, fifth-year senior, he's been banged up at times. He's definitely shown more ability than I thought he had. There was a point in his career where you sort of thought, okay, this is like a tough, smart kid playing quarterback, and, his arm's okay. But, well, I don't know about that. I mean, last year, he before he got hurt, he was really stringing some nice throws, and I thought flashed an NFL caliber arm. I think most teams will have a draftable grade on him at this point and adjust it based on what he does this season. And I think you're right. This game has a great opportunity for him because, and it's not just him, of course, but in terms of being a prospect, you think about it as a one guy situation, but when they face Clemson and when they face the big dogs, they've gotten manhandled a lot. There have been plenty of games where he's beaten up on equal competition or played well in shootouts, and I think he throws well on the move. He's got some toughness. There's an interesting quality to his game. I don't know if he's ever an NFL starter, but I think he's a good player. And this one, you're right. I mean, it's going to be a loud environment at Tennessee, and I'll be fascinated to see how he fares.
He's Eric Edholm. Give him a follow on Twitter at Eric_Edholm. The piece is 5 NFL draft prospects to watch this weekend. And I'll give you guys a tease. All 3 defensive players he mentions in there, I love them. So go check it out. Go see the full list over at Yahoo. And, of course, check out his conversation with Jalen Hurts over at Yahoo Sports as well. Eric, always appreciate talking with you. Love the insights. Keep up the great work.
Thank you, man. We'll talk to you down the road, and let's see what happens in that Eagles game.